Hello students, I am Professor Namrata Hampivadi from Department of Commerce and Accountancy, KALS GCC, Belgavi. So in our previous class, we have studied about the meaning of preference shares and equity share along with the types of preference shares and equity shares. Now in today's class, let us look into the difference between the preference shares and equity shares. So before that, going to the distinction, let us see about the meaning of preference shares and equity shares. So preference shares are those shares which carry the preferential rights in concert to the payment of dividend and as well as a repayment of capital, wherein the equity shareholders that is equity shares are those shares which do not come in the bracket of preference shares. That is, the shares apart from the preference share are considered here as a equity shares. So here equity shareholders are the residual claimants as to the dividend and return of the capital. That is, the return depend upon the profitability of the company. Now let us look into their differences. So here the first difference says that preference shares are entitled to the fixed rate of dividends, wherein the rate of dividends on the equity share depend on the distributable profit available to them. Yes. So when it comes to the preference share, the return what we give to the preference shareholders will be fixed rate, that is fixed rate of dividend. Whatever may be the profit, the company may earn a good profit in the particular financial year, or it may incur even loss also. But the payment for the preference shareholders, that is a return what we give for the investment which is made by the preference shareholders, will be fixed dividend, that is fixed rate of the dividend. Now suppose they fix that 8% dividend fully paid, that is they have to pay 8% return on whatever profit they have earned. But wherein in case of the equity shareholders, the rate return what we give to the equity shareholders will depend upon the profit which is remaining after deducting all the expenses. That is, for whatever is left for the distribution purpose, out of that profit they are going to fix a rate wherein the return will be given to the equity shareholders. Then here, coming to the preference shareholders, dividend on preference shares is paid in the priority to the equity shareholders. That is, first returns will be given to the preference shareholders. Whenever the company makes a profit, then whenever profit is remaining for the distribution, that is declaration of the dividend, first declaration is made for the preference shareholders. That is, the priority for the repayment will be given to the preference share and then to the equity shareholders. So here for the equity shareholder, the dividend on equity shares is paid only after the preference dividend has been paid. So for the preference shares, the first priority is given, that is return is given to them first, and then it is paid to the equity shareholders. Then next here, the preference shares must be not fully paid back first in the date of redemption or liquidation, whichever is earlier. That is, here preference share must be full. There is a correction here. Here the preference shares must be paid. It is, that is not fully paid. It doesn't come there. So the preference share must be fully paid. I'll make a correction there. It must be fully paid back in the date of redemption. That is, it is a agreed date or the maturity date when the company has to return back the shares to the investors, or the liquidation here is means what, here winding up, that is closure of the company. So whichever is earlier, that time the company have to pay back the preference share to its holder. But in case of the equity shareholders, the equity shares are paid only after the preference share capital has been paid. So even in case of the capital also, the first preference is given to the preference shareholders, then to the equity. So here at last, when there is a winding up of the company, only that time the equity shareholders are being paid back. That too if the amount is left after paying the preference shareholders and other creditors of the company. Next here, In case of preference shares, so in case of in case of cumulative preference shares, arrears of dividend is carried forward and it is paid when there is sufficient profit. So let us consider this point by taking an example. Suppose company doesn't make any profit this year, so when there is no like it cannot declare the dividend where the profit is very low. Okay, so when there is no enough sufficient even to pay the fixed rate of dividend, so what it just postpone the payment of the dividend. So even the next year if it is not possible, now here lockdown, in the lockdown there was no business, right? So because of that the company may be not able to give the returns or the dividends. So in such case for the preference shareholders, they are paid in arrears. That is, in whichever year they have not received the dividend, that is paid in the next subsequent year. But in case of the equity shares, unpaid dividend is not accumulated. That means if there is a no profit, they are not going to get any returns even now and even in the coming days. But in case of the preference share, if they didn't get this year, next year surely they are going to get the dividend. But in case of the equity shareholders, they are not going to get the returns if that particular year doesn't incur any doesn't make any profits. So not even in the next year also. Then coming to the preference share voting rights. So the voting rights of the preference shareholders are restricted and they can vote only in the matter which they are concerned. So when it comes to the power and authority, the preference shares enjoy very less powers here. That is, voting right is not given to them. The voting right is restricted. Only the matter which is concerned to them, there they can vote or they can give their opinion, but not in the other matter of the company. But wherein an ordinary equity shareholders can vote in all the matters of the general meeting. That is, during the general meeting, their opinion is considered. That is, their voting right are considered in case of equity shareholders. Next, coming to the bonus. So here bonus share or the right shares are usually not issued or not allowed to the preference shareholders. That is, whenever the company earn bonus, that is extra profit, not bonus, when we can say that it makes a super profit, that is above the normal profit. Whenever it earns, it can even declare the bonus. So bonus is something addition. So the preference share will not get any additional bonus or the additional returns here. But in case of the equity, the company can issue the bonus share to the existing shareholders. Only to the existing shareholders it can issue its bonus shares. Then coming to the preference shares, so your preference shares are preference shares are redeemable in 20 years from the date of issue. That is, they can be written back or they can be traded, or you can say that they may be issued to somebody else after the 20 year. That is, it has a maturity time. So your redeemable means what? That can be returned or that can be exchanged for a consideration in 20 years from the date of issue. That is, they have a 20 years of the time period, which we can say that a maturity time. Then in case of the equity shares cannot redeemed during the lifetime of the company. That is, it cannot be returned back to the company, but there is a buyback of equity share is permitted. Buyback means what here? The shares can be purchased back. That is, a company can purchase its own share from the shareholders. That is here buyback. So that is permitted here. So that is not taken back, but that is purchased here from the shareholders. Then here for the preference share, there is a no rights to take part in the management. So whatever maybe the whatever activities takes place in the management, there is no interference of the preference share. They are not given that right. But in case of the equity share, they have a right to control and manage in the events of the company. So here when it comes to the right in case of the management, that is in case of management, the equity shareholders have good control in the management and the affairs of the company. But in case of the preference shares, they are not allowed to make a much interference. But when we look into the monetary terms, here preference share may enjoy good returns when compared to the equity. But to be on the safer side and risk free, shareholders enjoy the more rights here. So in this class we complete with the share equity shares and preference shares, that is a source of under the structure of capital. We have done with shares. In the next class we will be seeing with the debentures.